All right, hello everyone, it's Germane again. As you know, we've been presenting this series for you, Journey Through the Galactic Heritage Cards, and we do recommend that you watch in the order of the videos so that you can have the complete context of the information. We are happy to share with you today the last 4 cards of the deck. We are finally, after a few years, finished with the series of cards, the 108 cards. So, as you know, the journey through these cards has mirrored the journey of consciousness as it's separated from the source. And we gave this diagram actually at the very, very beginning, where we've used this diagram many times to talk about the one consciousness, which is the outer circle representative of it, and how that one consciousness created within itself a realm in which it could experience separation. So all of the individual souls and all of the physical universe is played out in that inner circle. And all these little pieces of consciousness that you know of as separate souls began their journey of experience, feeling very alone, feeling very isolated and very separated. And so as we journeyed through the physical species of the cards, we shared with you the main players that are relevant to your life on Earth now. There are many, many other players, but these are the relevant ones. And we took you through civilizations such as the Lyrans and the Vegans and the Zetas and the Syrians and the Pleiadians and assorted other beings in there as well. But the details, of course, of galactic history are not really so important. The more important aspect is the journey itself. The journey from the one through the separation, through the fragmentation to deep, deep polarity, such as your Orion forefathers. And then the journey from that deep, deep polarity and deep separation back into integration, back into awakening, and finally back to the one. So here we are now at the end of the deck, which means you've taken most of that journey with us now through these videos. The last video before this, we talked about the species of Essassani, who are representative, we would say, of hybrid species in general. And you can watch that video to hear about the details. But we also talked about the very, very last card within the Essassani cards, which had to do with leaving home. And it was representative of the idea that at that level of consciousness, a species finally lets go of the previous pain and belief systems that defined it. And that is when they become free. So now in this series today, we are going to talk about the Orion consciousness. But for those of you astute students of the deck, you know that we have renamed the Orion species in this future third era. We now call them the Orion Light because they have transcended the polarity that once defined them. This was no small feat. It happened through a great amount of effort and pain, but it happened. And being that the Orion civilization represented the most polarized consciousness of your immediate galactic family, that means then that you have the opportunity on Earth to, in a sense, benefit from the road they have taken to heal themselves. So if we go back then to that last card in the last video, the leaving home card, which would have been 104 of the Essassani, we were talking about how what that refers to is leaving behind the pain and the belief systems that once defined you and going into the unknown. The unknown can be a very, very frightening experience for consciousness, just by its nature. There's nothing wrong if one feels frightened of the unknown. However, fear cannot allow you to stop your evolution. So on you go into the fear. That brings us to this card, number 105. And as we have said, it's now the Orion Light species. This is the Orion consciousness transformed. On the card it says future era. We also call it third era, which is the era of species awakening. This card 105 is called Light of Awareness. What does this mean? Well, as we were talking about this idea then of letting go of all that defines you, that has defined you as physical beings, which would be the fear and the belief systems, etc. And in spite of that, you let go and you go off into the unknown. What happens? Now that there is no, let's say, egoic interpreter of reality that tells you this is bad and that's good and I don't like this and I like that, and you have moved past that idea of polarity and paradox we talked about 2 videos ago in the Zeta section. You are simply a consciousness now, very close to reintegration. We also mentioned that when you get to this place, it is like a snowball rolling down the hill, so to speak. Therefore, it begins happening very, very rapidly. So you could say another type of alchemy happens. Now that you've gone through the fear of the unknown and you are getting used to this new expansive state with no ego to interpret reality or to limit your experience, you start to experience what this card says, the light of your awareness. It is as if a candle flame, so to speak, gets ignited that reminds you of your true nature, your true state of consciousness. You see there's a little candle here in the artwork that David has done. And it is representative of that light that is no longer obscured by ego, by belief systems, by pain. It is the true light of your being, and it begins to awaken, it begins to ignite. So the Orion civilization then, they did experience this as well. And many of you here on Earth now are tapping into this time period, if you will, or this energy of the Orion Light to assist with the transformation process on Earth. Now, if you've gotten the card in your reading, we would say that you can interpret it as an invitation. An invitation to allow yourself to go into the unknown, even if the fear is present, to allow yourself to do the work as defined in the previous video with your inner integrative work, and to allow yourself to begin to sense that candle, the proverbial candle that represents the light of your consciousness. Once again, this is not something that can be experienced through thought or with the mind. It is experienced through experience. And therefore, you can tap into it by putting yourself in positions in which this consciousness within you can be revealed. Now we have to be clear here. This is not something to strive for. It's not something out there. It is your true nature. but much like clouds obscure the sun from time to time, the experience of physical reality with the egoic thoughts and the belief systems all distorting the experience of reality, those are like clouds that obscure the true light of your being. So this is an invitation then, if you get the card in your reading, that this is where a next step is available to you if you choose to take it. Chances are there are other beings, whether they are Orion Light beings or other beings connected to your own helpers, who are guiding you with this process. So it's a very serious invitation. And, well, if you say no this time, don't worry. You'll get the invitation again. All right, so that is what that card is representative of. Now, let's say then that you take the invitation, you accept the invitation, and you begin exploring this light of your being as it is igniting, as it is awakening. What happens? Well, you know, when we get to this level of talking about consciousness, words really cannot clearly define what we wish to express, and so we always use metaphor. Therefore, we're going to go to the next card and use a metaphor for this one. Again, it's Orion Light, card 106, Force of Attraction. What does that mean? Well, the best metaphor to use is that when you have a candle flame, it attracts the moths, yes? Light is an attracting force. So when you get to this point then of your own awakening process, you are going to start to notice, remember we said the snowball rolling down the hill idea, that momentum keeps increasing. Things become attracted to you, much like the grass and the rocks get stuck in the snowball as it rolls down the hill. So you become a beacon, so to speak, for if there are any other aspects of your experience that have not been owned or integrated or accepted, they immediately get attracted. But not only that, we look on the macro level. And on the macro level, at this point of evolution, we're not talking about species anymore. We are talking about the whole reintegrating itself. So when we're talking about force of attraction then, it's also referring to the magnetic properties of this integration process at the very high levels of its completion stage, let's say. So what is happening here is, of course, not anything that can be controlled by you as a human if you are tapping into this card. It's more a statement of what is happening more on the unconscious levels, on the macro level. So if you get this card, Force of Attraction, in your reading, you can look at it on a variety of levels, but the overall idea is that as you are igniting your own flame of your consciousness, you might be attracting to you the things that need to be incinerated in your own light. Now that's maybe speaking a little bit vaguely, but as your light burns bright, what has been in the shadows comes out in order to be burned, in order to be transformed through the light of your own consciousness. That's the attractive force that is referred to by this card. So if you get the card in the reading then, it's probably a good indication to tell you, or to remind you actually, that whatever might be coming up in your reality that is something unpleasant or that you don't want to see or that is painful, It's coming up in order to be transformed by the light or the candle of your own awareness. So it's kind of also a message of reminding you to keep going with your work. And if it feels like maybe you haven't been doing your work, but yet you get the card, then it is most likely a reminder, or we said before, a kick in the pants, yes, to get you to start paying more attention to feeding the flame of your awareness instead of the distraction of the ego, so that things that need to be burned can go into the metaphorical fire to be burned. All right, so that is what that is referring to. Now, as this process happens, so the attraction process happens with all the things that are still separate, so to speak. You can say that now we have to slow down the process in order to explain the next card. So we're going to, again, have to use metaphor. Let's say you're a black hole and you're sucking in debris, and this debris is what was previously separate, and it's going to be transformed through the fires of your consciousness. But let's slow down the process now. So again, it's a metaphor, but you see something coming towards you slowly, something that you don't like about yourself maybe. And it's slowing down enough before it hits the fire that you see what it is. And let's stop there, talk about the next card. Number 107, true compassion. What does this mean? At this point, when you've become the flame, attracting the things to be burned, most of the time they are not only individual to you, they are collective. They exist on the collective within all of the fractals that you previously thought were separate. So a judgment, for example, about another person, they are a fractal view, so it's an aspect of you. All right, so then when you see this thing slowing down, and it's something maybe that is alien to you, no pun intended, or something uncomfortable, what happens? At this level of consciousness, you no longer see it as separate or unwanted. You see it as existing in the collective. So you see that every other previously viewed separate level of consciousness had the same thing. And so compassion begins to be born. That is a level of compassion that is unlike what is known on the human level. Because when you see it, you know you've experienced it. You know everyone has experienced it. And in that joint experience, there is a compassion for the pain that all has experienced through that thing. And then it goes into the fire, so to speak. So this idea of true compassion then is not referring to the type of compassion, for instance, the Buddhists might tell you that you should have. It's not the type of compassion that you try to have with friends that are hurting. Those are all on a human level. Nothing wrong with that. But we're talking about something at a little bit higher level that is a representative of you beginning to see yourself in the fractal that is everyone else. And therefore, as you have compassion for others, you have compassion for yourself. As you have compassion for yourself, you have compassion for others. There's no longer any differentiation between you, your fractal, and the fractals of others. So this type of true compassion, we would say, is like the last step or the last vestige of any type of separation. It's both separation and not separation. We know we're having a little bit of difficulty with the languaging here, because at this point of consciousness there is no duality, but yet we're using a dualistic language to try to explain it. So it is a paradox. Just know it has to do with the fractal of you and others being fractal of the one hologram. Now, if you have gotten this card in your reading, more often than not, it has to do with being a direct message to you to please have compassion for yourself, first and foremost. That very often humans are their own worst critics, and they beat themselves up for emotions that they might feel or actions they might have done. And all of that stops the whole process of alchemy that we were talking about in the Essassani cards before this one. So if you've gotten this in your reading, it's most likely a direct reflection for you of a message that has to do with being more compassionate with yourself, but also it is definitely a message or an invitation to begin to experience compassion more on this macro level. It's an invitation for you to ask yourself, can I feel my pain in everyone else too? Can I move more to the holographic level and see that we are really only fractals of the one? This will change your relationship to pain in ways that cannot be described until you experience it. So if you've gotten it in your reading, then it is really a very deep invitation to go within yourself and do this inner work. And especially if perhaps you have someone in your life who is hurting, that you can work with connecting to them on a whole different level than you've been doing before. We cannot really give you a roadmap to it because you have to find your own way. We feel like we're planting a little bit of seeds because the revelation of this experience, the revelation of connecting with this, will tell you when you've gotten there. All right? You don't have to chase it. It happens naturally on your way back to completion. All right? But it can start with you on the individual level. Have compassion with yourself, and the rest unfolds naturally. All right, finally now, we go back to the diagram that was given with the first cards, which we were showing you a little bit earlier. And we've been talking about this idea of integration for many video series now. And again, we have to use metaphor, but we drew this little separated realm in the middle as representative of your journey into separation. So as you begin the integration process then, the separation between the one hologram and the fractal selves becomes less and less and less. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the eraser and we're going to just kind of lighten those lines a little bit. It's not doing exactly what we want it to do, but you can kind of barely see. There's still a little bit of fractalization or separation there. But as consciousness is now moving to the final stages of its integration on a collective level, remember we were telling you again, the snowball gains speed. Eventually, Separation is no more. So you have the metaphor then of just the circle. And this brings us to card number 108. Last card of the deck. The theme is emptiness. What does that mean? Well, it is also a paradox, but as you've seen here with the board, when we have erased the part of separation, you have a realm that is empty of separation. So you could say emptiness is referring to that. The loss of separation. Just oneness. The paradox is that though you say it's empty of separation, it is also full. It is full of the one consciousness. And that is the ultimate paradox. So card number 108 then is referring to, you could say, the end of the road, although we don't see things linearly that way. It's more like a cycle. But you can say, for all intents and purposes, it is the end of the journey of separation. It is the Ouroboros, or it is the head and the tail coming together, so to speak, the completion of a cycle. And it is representative then of your one true nature of consciousness. Now, card number 1 of the deck, which is the Founder card, represents the first fragmentation. So if there was a card 0, you could say card 0 is the same as card 108. And that would be the link point. That's what makes it a complete circle. Now, if you got this card in your reading, again, many ways to interpret it, but it's usually always a reminder of your true nature. For instance, if you, let's say, had a drama going on in your life, and you pulled this card, in that case it could be interpreted as there's something greater, there's something more complete, there's something more whole than this drama you are experiencing. So allow yourself to tap into that true nature of who you are. That's the invitation of this card. This is really, in a sense, your true home. Empty and full simultaneously. Your Orion forefathers, integrating polarity as they did, have gone back home to this place. And that is one of the reasons why we put them at the end of the deck, because they are very good role models, let's say, for humans, to help you know that your consciousness, as unlikely as it might seem or feel right now, is on the same road. And once again, we remind you that we had to, of course, present all of this linearly, but the whole journey, the whole process is not linear, and we know it's hard for people to wrap their minds around this, but the whole process is happening simultaneously. With that holographic principle then, you pull in the energies of the hologram that you need in any given moment for your experience. So sometimes you might pull in first era Orion. Sometimes you might pull in second era Pleiadian. All because that is the energy that you need in your experience at present time, but it is all happening in one universal moment, the universal now. We thank you for going on this journey with us, and There will be more videos in the future, but for now, simply accept our deepest love and gratitude, and we send you much love.